CRM was supposed to improve customer relationships. Instead, it's shorthand for can't resolve much. Which means you may have sunk a fortune into software that just bounces customer issues around but never actually solves them. On the ServiceNow AI platform, CRM stands for something better. With AI built into one platform, customers aren't mired in endless loops of automated indifference. They get what they need, when they need it. Bad CRM was then. This is ServiceNow.
You open the fridge, there's nothing there. So what's it gonna be? Greasy pizza? Sad drive-thru burgers? Dish by Blue Apron is for nights like that. These are the pre-made meals of your dreams. At least 20 grams of protein, no artificial flavors or colors, no chopping, no cleanup, no guilt. Keep the flavor, ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to Howie the podcast from Local Report. And today we continue our Top 10 series where we shamelessly steal the match of the day Top 10 format and then apply a Sunderland twist to it. Last time it was managers, which was a tough one. But today we've set ourselves a really tough target. Today we're going to be ordering the top 10 Sunderland strikers of the Stadium of Light era. So once again, I'm very lucky that I'm not going to be doing this alone. So to help me, I have 3 gentlemen who are chomping at the bit to put their head on the blocks and explain their thinking. And first up, we have someone who just knew he was right last time, and he knew that everyone else was wrong when it came to the manager's top 10. It is, of course, Gavin Henderson. Hello, Gav.
Hello, mate. Yes, I was right. And nobody's proven otherwise since, so I'm hanging on to that one.
How is it? And I mean, just on this one, because I kind of touched on it being tough. I mean, this was. I found this much harder to pick a top 10 than managers.
Yes, yeah, we deliberated long and hard over some of these, didn't we? There's probably, I mean, we'll get into it, but there's probably another 5, 6, 7 strikers at least who you could make a very solid argument for being in there. So we've, if anybody's listening to this and they'll hear what our shortlist is and they think we're wild on a few of them. We did really think long and hard about this and try to work out the best solution. So, yeah, we might upset a few people, but we'll see.
Well, I'm looking forward to the reaction from the shortlist, but haven't seen your top 10s, lads. We might get a bit of reaction from that as well, but we'll get into it because next up we have our man from down under and also head of the Nerd Brigade when it comes to our On This Week group meeting, therapy meeting that we have every week. It is, of course, Martin Wunless. Sorry, mate.
Hello, mate. Head of the Nerd Brigade. I've been called worse, I have to say, but thank you very much. I think it's interesting when we put together this shortlist, isn't it? Because we'd gone down the track and had a few back and forth. Then Gav said, "Oh shit, we've missed out to 4." So we've kind of built this list up over a little bit of time, but it was really hard, wasn't it, to get it down to 10? And as we've said, there's 4, 5, 6 others that you could make a strong case for. So, yeah, as you say, to get the list down to 10 has been interesting. And I'm really interested and keen to find out what Gavin, our other guests, who we haven't introduced yet, have put down for their top 10, because mine's right.
It was especially hard when some knobhead, to be not named, Gavin Henderson, had recency bias and wanted someone in from last season, but we might touch on that. Because also joining us is a recognisable voice from our On This Week series and also the last top 10s. And I'm so glad he's returned after the experience of the manager's top 10. I'm pleased to say we have Andrew Smithson with us. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, mate. It was touch and go whether I came back or not.
I mean, I did kind of drop that bombshell on you that we were doing the top 10 last time out. And then the whole Lee Johnson saga, mate.
Right. All I would say is, all I did was say he was decent. I didn't. I think I said to you off air, Chris. I didn't say I wanted him getting the freedom of the city, or I wasn't going to say he could marry me firstborn. I just said I thought he did a decent job.
You know what the best thing was? I think I saw one comment basically saying that your reasoning was brilliant. absolutely right. And of course, we said that in the pod as well, and that's what it's all about. So it was absolutely brilliant.
You just know, by the way, that Andrew's picks today are going to be the safest picks ever.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll get into that. Don't worry about it.
I thought it was. I thought it was a pretty safe.
Oh,
safe
list. He's sweating again, isn't he? He's sweating.
Well, let's find out, because let's crack on. Because as I said, we're shamelessly stealing the BBC Match of the Day top 10 format. So anyone who's not familiar and hasn't listened to the Managers one, which you need to go back and listen to if you haven't listened to that, we pick a subject to rank, which in this case is the top 10 Sunderland AFC strikers from the Stadium of Light era. So first we had to shorten the list down to 10 and then put those, and then in this podcast, we put those 10 into some sort of order from best to worst. You might ask why the Stadium of Light era. Well, as I explained on the Managers one, as much as we want to bring in the likes of Marco Gabbiadini, Gary Rowell, and all of those strikers that have played for Sunderland in the past, it just makes it more effective if we've all actually experienced seeing the players in actions, and it also keeps things a bit simple. So there we are. So let's get into our top 10, because the top 10 that have been selected for us to discuss are in alphabetical order. We've got Asamoah Gyan, Darren Bent, Jibril Cisse, Jermaine Defoe, Kenwyne Jones, Kevin Phillips, Marcus Stewart, Niall Quinn, Ross Stewart, and Stephen Fletcher. So just a little list of some to miss out. And you might be screaming at us saying, oh, you missed him, which is, please get in touch and answers on a postcard if we have missed any. But we've got the likes of Charlie Wyke, and this is in no order, by the way. Charlie Wyke, Josh Madger, David Connolly, Wilson Isidore, Stephen Elliott, Michael Bridges, Eliza Mayenda, which we might get into, Daniel Dicchio, Fabio Barini. So we've got a list of players there who played at various levels, Gav. And as we said, we had real trouble putting this final 10 together. And you were really campaigning for Mayenda to be in there. So would you still argue the case that he should be in there?
Yeah, I would. I'm not going to say who ahead of, obviously, because we're going to get into our top 10s and stuff. But I just think,
Butler,
in terms of being the whole package, you know what it is, though? I think I've noticed this every time I talk about him recently. I think I might be the biggest fan of Eliza Mayenda on planet Earth at the minute. I just think he's brilliant. And I think if we did this top 10 in a year's time, after we've had a season in the Premier League, I think he would be certainly in there, because I think next season he's going to hit the ground running, and he's going to be somebody who takes the Premier League football like a duck to water. I'm really confident of that. But obviously, we can't do that right now. We don't know how he's going to fare. I'm just I'm putting me Mystic Meg goggles on and looking ahead and see what I think might happen. But I would have Mayenda in there, even based on what he's done already.
So just quickly, Gav, was he, like, let's say that bunch of strikers who have missed out, is he at the top of the list? So if someone else is going to make it, Mayenda's at the top of your list to jump in.
Yeah. I just think for quality of goal, his impact on getting us promoted, you know, the cool calmness that he showed in the final at Wembley, which, you know, you could make that case for maybe Fabio Barini. Barini scored goals against Newcastle and scored in a cup final too. So, you know, Barini would be right up there as well. But yeah, it might be a little bit of recency bias, but I would definitely have Mayenda in my top 10. But I was overruled.
Interestingly, just on Barini, very quickly, he had, out of all of the players we've mentioned, he had the worst goals per game ratio out of everyone. Scored 17 in 93. But
most of them came in his first season, didn't they?
Yeah,
you know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't just focus on one season. His second season, he was shite, but they all were, you know. And the other thing with Barini, which I think we talked about when we were putting the list together, he didn't actually play that much up front in that first season. He played off the left, and he actually, even in his second season, he did. And you remember he scored against Crystal Palace, and he sprinted over to Sam Allardyce to celebrate in front of him, didn't he? Was it Sam Allardyce or Moyes? I can't remember, but he did something, some big gesture to try and like prove a point, because he hadn't been getting a game. And you do forget these things, and we'll come on to this a bit later on when we're talking about like bits of people's history which you forget, because I was trying to reckon this up with every player that we put on the list, you know. So yeah, Fabio Barini maybe a bit unlucky, but he wasn't an out and out centre forward for most of his time, so that would be why he would be left off my list.
And just very quickly, in that first season, he scored 10 goals, but 4 of them were penalties. But Martin, We purposely left it vague in terms of criteria. We just left it as strikers. You asked, but I said it's kind of up to you, really, because some people go, oh, well, actually, I thought he was good at this, or not necessarily a goal scorer like we've maybe mentioned in the terms of Perini. So, I mean, what were your thoughts on the final 10 and who ended up missing out?
Well, I'm just still reeling from the revelation that Stephen Fletcher, not Ashley Fletcher, who's on that final list, because I need to rework my order now. Look, I think it's really difficult because if you're going on literally on the best strikers you've seen play for Sunderland at Stadium of Light, that's a different list to the best Sunderland strikers at the Stadium of Light and what they've done for the club. So
you've just blown my mind.
Well, because
I'm lost.
Well, there's a nuance to it, Christopher. And there'd be some. I'll put it this way, right? If you asked just a non-Sunderland supporter to rank those 10 strikers, I bet they would have different rankings to what we individually have. Because some players on the list who did more and were better recognised strikers internationally or whatever than they did for Sunderland. But you've kind of got to have that club element into it as well, haven't you? So it was, look, you know what? I'll let you in on a secret, right? I deliberated so long and hard to find a way to not justify the obvious top 2. And whether I found it or not, we'll see as we come on to it, because you kind of want to have a good debate, don't you?
Well, like I said, there's a few genuine shocks that I was really surprised at when it came in, but yeah, I want to get into it. And yeah, Andrew, I mean, look, I went through those players who we missed out. I mean, you know, what were your thoughts? And does anybody from that list get in there for you, or should have gotten in that top 10 for you?
I think David Connolly had a decent shout. You know, he played in a promotion season. But the reason there's so many choices is barely any of these strikers stay for long. They seem to be decent for a couple of seasons and then move on, or they come in, they're rubbish, and they're just like hanging around for years, not getting any games. So I think that's why we've ended up with so many possibilities. But no, David Connolly, I think, did somebody mention Michael Bridges previously? He might have been in with a shout. But no, Chris, I think this 10's pretty reasonable.
Danny Dichio should have been.
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry. That's a different pod. We're just having an hour-long special on him next week.
As regular listeners on this week will know only too well my thoughts on Danny Dichio.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I mean, because, we're talking about levels, and like I said, we left it quite vague, and people could kind of, say why they wanted to have people in what orders and things like that. So we weren't saying favourite, we weren't saying best goal scorer, we weren't saying anything like that. But Charlie Wyke, of course, last player to score 30 goals in a season for us, Martin, and he didn't make the top 10.
Well, nobody was there to see it, were there? Doesn't count. No, like I think in all seriousness, he obviously had a great season that year. Aidan McGeady was putting him on the plate for him. I think you've got to take into account the level that we're playing at, and I think all of these players who we've chosen in the top 10 have done the business for us in the Premier League or in the Championship. So I think Charlie Wyke, he could probably make a strong case for himself to be included, but really, I think when you're up against the quality of the players that we've got in that top 10 and the quality of players who we've had to leave out, I think even if you were putting it 11 to 20, Charlie Wyke would still be pretty low on that list for me.
Yeah. Just add on that as well. Yeah, Martin touched on it there, kind of half jokingly there, but there was nobody there to see it, and that was probably why he scored so many, because there was no pressure on him, no crowd because you got to think before that season, like White wasn't particularly popular, was he? He was just a player that people were kind of sick of. They didn't have thought he was shite, and then he had a really good season, but there was no fans in the ground, and you look and you go, well, is that why he played so well? And he didn't actually. You never used to watch him and think he played brilliantly. He didn't dominate defenders and stuff. He was just in the right place at the right time most of the time, and that's great forward play. But yeah, third tier as well. It's difficult. I think even when he left, he scored 30-odd goals for us, and he left, and nobody was bothered. And that said more about Charlie Wyke, I think, than anything else. Really, he can score 31 goals or whatever it was for Sunderland and leave on a free, and absolutely nobody batted an eyelid.
Yeah, I found that I mean, I understood it, but it's a real strange one when you look back. People in 30 years' time will go, hang on, they'll look at the records and go, what, Charlie White scored 30 goals and then we just let go on a free, and they'll be like, well, something must have happened, or what was going on. But I just don't think he was fancied. Just very quickly, Andrew, just in terms of that list that we missed out, the player with the highest goals per game ratio of the top two divisions that we missed out was David Connolly, and he dropped out quite close to the end when we were looking at this top 10 until we realised we forgot somebody. but yeah, he's got and it's interesting because, you talk about strikers and quite often he's the type of player you forget about because he played a major role in getting that Roy Keane team promoted.
He did. He was only in the team for about a season. I don't think he really got much of a crack of it in the Premier League, but he was important for us. He scored some really important goals. I remember that big game against Burnley on the Friday night. He missed a penalty and then stood up and took another one later on in the night when the pressure was on. So he did a great job for us. And again, had things been different, we were linked with David Connolly way before he actually came to the club. So in a different world, he might have joined us a lot sooner and he might well have got in this top 10.
Well, it was when Phillips signed, wasn't it? It was when Phillips signed that summer. We tried to sign Connolly first.
Yeah. And when Phillips left as well. I've been doing a bit of digging around that time, and there's loads of news reports from when we were getting rid of Phillips after relegation that Connolly was the man that Mick McCarthy wanted to replace him with. Yeah. It was a bit like, it was almost, it happens with Sunderland quite often, that, doesn't it? We get linked with strikers. Peter Crouch is one that comes straight to mind that we'd agreed bids with. Robbie Keane, another one. These strikers who, had gone on to do really good things in the game, and we just tried time after time to get them and they never came. But with Connolly, he did. And also, I'm just looking now, Connolly actually, I didn't realise this, maybe just because it's been so long now, but he only started one game for us in the top flight, 2 sub-appearances, after being our top scorer the season before. It's pretty brutal from Roy Keane, isn't it?
Yeah, not often that happens. But yeah, well, look, let's get into our top 10s. And let's start with you, Gav. Could you give us your countdown from 10 up to 6, please?
Okie doke. So, number 10, I've got Marcus Stewart. 9, Stephen Fletcher. 8, Ross Stewart. 7, Jibril Cisse. And at 6, I've got Asamoah Gyan.
Oh, I saw Martin frantically scribbling down your bottom 5 so we could take the piss. But look, you've got Marcus Stewart bottom of the pile, and the other lads have him a little bit higher, which we'll find out in a minute. And the job he did in the Championship in terms of that title-winning season was his best season for us. Scored 17 in 43 appearances. So I assume for you that's why he's behind the Premier League players who score goals like Cisse and Gyan, but he's also behind Ross Stewart. So what makes Marcus Stewart bottom of your 10?
I think of all the players in the list that we've got, he's the one who I think if you polled more Sunderland fans, they would remember least fondly, not for any particular reason. I think he was. We've talked about this on some of the other pods, haven't we? About that period just being a bit of a haze for most of us. Like we talk about the Roy Keane season, we talk about the Peter Reid promotions. You guys obviously talk about the promotion under Dennis Smith quite a lot. And that period was a bit of it's just sort of, it's the least fondly remembered promotion of all, really. And it's nothing to do with Marcus Stewart, really, necessarily. But he did score a lot of goals that season, but we don't really think very fondly about that period. And with him in particular, when we signed him, he was a bit of a flop at first, wasn't he? Didn't really force his way into the team. Obviously, like I said, I've been doing a bit of digging around the end of that season when we got relegated from the Premier League. And a lot of the opinion at the time was that he was a massive waste of money, just like Torre Andre Flo was, who was signed on the same day. And obviously he went on to do very well. My favourite memory of him is scoring, a minute into the game against Wigan away on a Tuesday night, where there was 9,000 of us in their stadium. I mean, that was a massive night for us that season, because they were second, I think, weren't they? And we were both battling at the top end of the table, and we score after a minute and only win 1-0, but with 9,000 fans in the ground. That's the one that sticks out in my memory. But honestly, after that, I can't, and I went every game at the time, I can't remember any of his goals. Nothing stands out. So yeah, I mean, obviously the record shows he had an important part to play, a bit like Connolly. You can maybe put them kind of neck and neck in similar kind of impact. never then went on to translate it into Premier League football. But somebody obviously who did very well for us, and he's in the top 10. And I mean, we just reeled off a bunch of names there. We reeled off the likes of Barini, who scored more important goals than Marcus Stewart. I would have made a case for my end being in there ahead of him. But still, done very well for us.
Well, he was actually 5th on our list in terms of goals. How many goals per appearances? So he's halfway up that list and he's in good company there. I mean, let's crack on and let's hear Martin. Can we have your rundown from 10 to 6, please?
Oh, here we go. So number 10, Asamoah Gyan. 9, Stephen Fletcher. 8, Marcus Stewart. 7, Ross Stewart. And 6, Djibril Cissé.
So you've been a little bit kinder to Marcus Stewart, having him in 8th place, and you've got Asamoah Gyan in last place, and then you've got the likes of Djibril Cissé ahead of him, who almost has exactly the same record, but you've got him a few places above him, and you've got the likes of the 2 Stewarts who did it at a lower level. So what has Asamoah Gyan bottom of your list?
Well, I didn't have any spreadsheets, Chris.
I've got all mine open in front of me.
You know what? This is just purely off my recollections of them, the records, and how I kind of liked them as players, and how I liked them as
Martin.
Yeah. And look, Gyan's obviously a great player, and he's proven it at international level. He came for a year, not even that really, and ditched just to go to wherever he went. He went to the Middle East, didn't he? And I think he showed flashes of ability, and he scored some nice finishes and good goals, and he danced. But really, I just don't think he did enough for us as a club. And this is kind of where I was going before with what a player did for the club versus how good he was throughout his career and what we've seen from him. And I just think he's one of those that he had so much potential, and he could have been a fantastic striker for us if he'd stuck around for a couple of seasons. Like Andrew said, you got these players who come in, show a little bit, and then bugger off somewhere. And I just think, I've got no real fond feelings for Gyan. I don't really care about him. He came in, got paid handsomely, strutted around for a little bit, scored a couple of nice goals, had a bit of a poor spell over the winter, I seem to remember, and then buggered off. So, yeah, I must have, when we were putting the top 10 list together, he was one I was like, you get rid of him, because I've got no feelings for him at all, really.
Yeah, but it's strange, isn't it? Because you've got Cissé in 7th, and looking at the record, Cissé scored 11 in 38, Asamoah Gyan scored 11 in 37. So are you purely just splitting them by their character?
Not really. I think you look at the teams that they came into as well. Like, in that spell, Gyan came into probably one of the better Sunderland sides that we've had over the past 20 years. He came into a side that, he was looked at as kind of like one of the missing bits of a good jigsaw, wasn't he? Come in, partner Darren Bent, who'd done really well the season before. And I think you look at Cissé, and I just remember being excited by Cissé as a player. Like he was came into the club at a time where Keane had just got promoted, had one season up there, and he signed in that summer, and he was a big name for us to get at the time. And look, Gyan was as well. He played in the World Cup and all that sort of stuff. But I just think Cissé, and again, look, Cissé had that period of time up until maybe January, February. Then he kind of went off the boil when it became evident he wouldn't be kept permanently.
It was that handshake, wasn't it, with Roy Keane at Blackburn?
It was, but then Sprazier came in, didn't he? And was he playing then? He was playing then, wasn't he?
Yeah, because he was one of the big people behind the scenes, wasn't he? Who was trying to. It was didn't he shout one? He was getting interviewed one time, and he shouted, "Give him the job!" or something.
No, that's right. That was away at Hull, I think, wasn't it? But look, I just like Cissé. I think he scored against the Mags, didn't he? And I just liked him.
Now we're getting into it. It's
a combination of things, isn't it? But look, I just think as a player to come in with the reputation he had at the stage of progress we were at, it was a big validation for him to come in to Sunderland at the time. I know he'd been at Liverpool and he'd had a bad leg break, hadn't he? So he was kind of coming back up on his career as well. And I just think, he came in and really took to the club. I think he opened a clothes shop, didn't he? And he kind of really kind of tried to embrace
in Newcastle, not in Sunderland.
In the region. It wasn't in Marseille, was it? It wasn't on the French Riviera.
Starting to sound like Piff now.
Look, I just think he came in. I think he really wanted to be at the club. He got the club, and for a spell, he was really invested in it. And I just, again, it was his debut away at Spurs. He came and scored a header for the winner. That was him, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Came off the bench, didn't he?
Did I?
I think. Yeah.
It was only a couple of days after he'd signed, I think. So look, I just liked him. And again, you've got all the stats and all everything else, and you kind of overlay that with your personal recollections and how you felt about them as a fan and how they kind of did it at the club, not just on the field. So no, I think I'm happy with Cissé where he is.
Interestingly as well, just on the record of Asamoah Gyan, he scored about the same goals as Cissé, 11. Well, he scored 11 goals in 2010.
2010 games, wasn't it?
Yeah, 33 games, but 11 of them he came on a sub. So he only started 22 and scored 11 goals, which is kind of makes his
every other game.
Yeah,
and he had a better song. He had a good song, Cissé.
No, it was the other way around. That was Jan's record coming on from the bench.
Right.
No.
I'm not changing my mind.
I wouldn't expect it.
So he was happy to back that up there when he thought it was Cissé.
Hey.
Stats go out the window.
If some evidence suits, I'll take it.
Well, let's get into Andrews. Can we have your countdown from 10 to 6, please?
Yes, you can. Number 10 had Asamoah Gyan. Sunderland's number 9. Djibril Cissé was number 9. Then that was genuine. That wasn't just for a lame pun. Number 8, I went with Stephen Fletcher. Number 7 for me was Kenwyne Jones. And then number 6, I opted for Marcus Stewart.
Yeah, well, we'll come back on to Kenwyne Jones, that choice that you made there. But Marcus Stewart, you've got him in his highest position of 6th. Again, what got him the nod? Because you've put him ahead of the likes of Fletcher, who you've got in 8th. You've got Gyan bottom. You've got Cissé in 9th. So you've got 3 players there who decent record in the Premier League, but you've got Marcus Stewart above them.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They all had decent Premier League records, but those 4 were kind of all much of a muchness for me. They had good days, they had bad days. Marcus Stewart, I take what Gav says about he'd come along in the Premier League and not quite hit it off. But for me, I just remember him scoring a lot of important goals at a time when the club were just in a mess. A lot of the other players that signed alongside Marcus Stewart were getting sold or were desperate to leave. Mick McCarthy, we've mentioned it before, Chris, haven't we? Mick McCarthy's come in, basically saved the club because they were financially in a lot of bother. So I think Marcus Stewart's goals for us were very important. And I just, sounds daft to say, I just liked him. I just thought he was a canny bloke, professional, likeable fella, and a really smart striker. He wasn't physical, but he found the right spaces. He was there to put chances away. Yeah, important for me, Marcus Stewart.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, you've got him in mid-table. Gav's got him as the Southampton of his league, the rock bottom of the league there. But just quickly, one person we haven't really touched on a huge amount in that bottom, because Stephen Fletcher, Andrew, looked great in his first season, but he's 9th on 2 lists and he's 8th on yours. You've actually got him the highest. He only scored 23 in 108 appearances, so let's say roughly 1 in 5. But you had him above Gyan and Cissé, who scored half the number of goals in just a third of the amount of games. So what had Fletcher above those 2?
Well, when you put it like that with those stats, I might flick it around.
Well, I expected you all to do your research, you see, Andrew, but
well, that's a low blow, that mind. I did do research. I've got this massive Word document here, and when Gav was reading through his, and I was comparing it with mine, I was panicking because I'm having to scroll and scroll and scroll and think that order doesn't match up. Well, what was the question? Yeah, why is Fletcher ever so slightly higher? I think it was that start. He was signed by Martin O'Neill. He came in, he hit the ground running. And at that point, we thought, something's happening here. Martin O'Neill had been really good at it when he first came in. He spent a bit of money on Fletcher. He'd been after Fletcher for a while. And I thought, yeah, this is looking good. For Fletcher and with a couple of the others, it was the fact that they had so many off days. And then by the end, we'd signed him for a lot of money. I think we let him go on a free in the end. We were happy for him to walk away without receiving a penny for him. So he did do well. He did look the business, and then just it drifted. And I think you could say the same for Jean, for Cisse and Kenwyn Jones. You could put together packages where they looked brilliant, but we can all remember days as well when they just looked as if they didn't give a nick.
Yeah. I mean, just quickly on that, Gav, because, I thought it was a great signing at the time. Big money from Wolves. I thought he was a cracking player. He was 25, in his prime, big money. And I thought that's a real kind of statement intent going to someone like Stephen Fletcher. I think a few clubs wanted him at the time.
Yeah, it was one of them kind of signings where Sunderland went and plucked someone's best player off them. And we spent a lot of money, mind, and that's what you've got to do to get the best player out of a club. But his first season, he was brilliant. He scored a lot of goals for us. And as with Fletcher, I totally take Andrew's point, which is why I've got Fletcher in 9th, and it's the off days that he had. But given he had a span of he had basically three and a half seasons with us, which is, as we mentioned before, some of these strikers disappeared after a year. He was there for three and a bit seasons, and he was part of teams which largely struggled, 13-14 season under Di Canio. We all know what went wrong there, and you can see that they wouldn't have seen eye to eye, certainly at first. And then Poyet came along, and I think Poyet quite liked him. Season after, he was a regular, played most games. I think he got 30 appearances in the Premier League that season, playing for Advocat and Poyet. And then the season after, he had some injuries, didn't he? But he played a fair bit as well alongside Defoe under Allardyce. So I think his time at Sunderland's kind of split up by injuries. I like to think, if Fletcher had been fit, he might have done a lot better than he did. But and also something else Andrew said there about losing him on a free. I think that was just of the period, wasn't it? It's only been now, really, we sign players and move them on for more money. We farmed him out on most bizarre loan ever, by the way, him going to Marseille. I still can't get my head around that. When I was in Marseille for work recently, and I got talking to the taxi driver who was driving us from Marseille airport, and obviously you get on about football, and he was going through the list of all the players who played for Sunderland and Marseille. And I think after about 10 minutes, he was scraping the barrel, and he mentioned Fletcher. And I was like, what was he like then? And he went, oh, no. He wasn't keen at all on Stephen Fletcher. But yeah, I like him, to be honest. I think on his good days, Fletcher was one of the best strikers I've seen at Sunderland, actually. Genuinely mean that. I think he had everything. He could hold it up. His footwork was fantastic. He had this innate ability to bring others into play. I used to love the way sometimes he could turn, and he was quite technical, like not saying he was anywhere near this level, but when I think about like a Dimitar Berbatov type striker, somebody who would get the ball and could do something really fancy with it, he was a bit like that, And I just think, when you think about some of the goals he scored, I think about that volley against Newcastle, it's quite an underrated goal against Newcastle, that one, isn't it? I think he did very well for us. It's just a shame that he was part of a squad which in the end got broken up because of inadequacies and just changing of regimes and managers. But funnily, despite the fact that we had so many different managers, they all seemed to like him, apart from Di Canio, he stuck around for a lot longer than some of these lads did. And that is maybe a testament to his character. You look right through his career, and he kind of, he had 6 seasons at Hibs, he had 2 at Wolves, he had 4 seasons with us, he had 4 with Sheffield Wednesday. I think even now, he's just had nearly 40 odd games in League One, getting promoted with Wrexham, and he must be nearly 40 now, 38-year-old. Sorry, I'll just check there. So he's obviously a popular lad and done quite well wherever he's been. But yeah, that's why he's maybe 9th in my list and not a little bit higher.
You mentioned, Gav, the goal against Newcastle. He's, if I remember rightly, he did raise his game against them a couple of times, and that was when you saw the best of him. There's that brilliant, we would say it's brilliant. There's that photo of him where he's up against Taylor and Taylor's getting smashed into the post. I think it's Fletcher who's going up against him. So on those days, he was a big physical presence. He really did it for us on those occasions.
And did he score a header against them? Did he score 2 goals against Newcastle?
That's what I was trying to think.
At the back post.
Yeah, the header. Was it?
The one I can think of was the 3-0 where it was a brilliant move and Kabul's ended up on the wing.
Over, didn't he?
Yeah. Now I feel as if he kind of like it was a sweep and volley, but
that
one was. I think he scored another. I think he scored another one where he hooked it into the net at the back.
Did he not score a header from a corner?
I'm not sure.
I think did we not have like a short corner and he who shall not be named knocked it in and Fletcher scored. I might be wrong. We're supposed to have good memories, us lot. I might be thinking wrong, but I feel like he scored it.
The volley one's the famous one, though, isn't it? Just the icing on the cake, wasn't it?
I mean, the ball from Kabul Marad's forward. It was a hell of a goal. It was a lovely goal. That was the one that sent the Mags absolutely west, wasn't it? Because they felt like they tortured us, and yet we won 3-0. And it was like, well, you didn't, Although Colaccini's red card had a big part to play and all that, but I digress. It was a lovely goal, though. It was again one of the most underrated goals probably against Newcastle. It was a brilliant team effort when you think.
Well, I can see Martin frantically digging away there. So
I am having a look.
I'm sure he's going to shout up at some point. But let's get into the top 5s. Andrew, could we start with you, please, and have your countdown from 5 up to your no? Actually, I tell you what. No, we'll do it normally. So I was gonna say we might do something different, but go on. We'll do your 5 up to your number 1, please.
Right. Okay. You're panicking me now. Right. Okay. So number 5, I went with Ross Stewart. Number 4 was Jermaine Defoe. I liked Darren Bent for number 3. Then this is maybe why you're thinking I might mix it up a bit. Yes, number 2 was Kevin Phillips, and number 1 for me, I went with the one and only Mr. Niall Quinn.
Right, we're gonna park.
I can see having to pick up your jaw.
We're gonna because I was surprised, but we'll park the discussion for the top 2 when the other lads have put theirs in because we'll come on to that. Because Andrew, the other 2, Gav and Martin, agreed on the bottom 5 and the top 5, but they just had them in a different order. You flipped Ross Stewart and Kenwyne Jones, where you had Ross Stewart in 5th and you had Kenwyne Jones in 7th. Looking at the goal scoring records, Jones scored, it was about 1 in 4, but was absolutely unbelievable on his day. But in terms of Ross
Stewart, by the way, I was waiting for you to say those words, on his day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the best strikers, I think, in the Premier League. I mean, if he'd almost, I think John Terry famously said that he was the best striker he played against. But you've got Ross Stewart above him. But actually, Andrew, just to give you a bit of backing on that, maybe Ross Stewart, actually, in terms of goals per game, he's only behind Darren Bent and Kevin Phillips in that kind of goals per game ratio. So, I mean, was it purely because of that goal scoring record? Because it was at a lower level, though.
It was at a lower level, and I dare say if you put Kenwyne Jones and Ross Stewart in the same team against a higher quality opposition, Kenwyne Jones might play better, but it's might. Ross Stewart, for me, I thought, given the state of the club at the time, he was exactly what we needed. I wish we'd seen a bit more of him in the Championship. He was the type of striker I really liked. You could play a bad ball up front and he would still try and battle for it. He would run into the channels. He would make defenders work. And then, on top of that, is that goal scoring record. He was massive for us in League One. He's also the example of how we should do things. Rather than signing these big name strikers for a lot of money and then they go off the boil and like Fletcher and like Jones, they kind of slink off in the background. Ross Stewart was an unheard of who we've plucked from nowhere. He's come along and he's thought, brilliant. I want to play for this club. I want to make a name for myself. And he knuckled down and yeah, like I say, I wish we'd seen more of him in the Championship because he was looking good at that level. and I think we might have had even more for him if injuries hadn't held him back. He's Premier League scorer now as well, isn't he? I think he got one on the last day of the season.
Just. I wonder with that whether we got any kickback in fees and stuff. Was there any clauses if he scores in the Premier League, someone get a bit more money? I would like to think so. There have been celebrations watching that game.
You'd be gutted if you were Southampton, given the way the season went, and then just as one final kick in the teeth, and you owe us a couple of grand for Stewart scoring.
I mean, just quickly, Gav, because you had him in 8th. Andrew had him much higher up in 5th, but
stop stirring it, Chris.
I think
Give it all.
That's my job. But he was the first kind of data-driven signing of the regime at that time, and I think he was one that was. I think they kind of had already on the shortlist I think it was when Speakman first came in that 1st January, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I can remember eyebrows being raised when we signed him because he'd been primarily playing. And I still can't get my head around this. Why were Ross County playing him left wing? Like, who was the idiot doing that? But anyways, he was playing primarily on the left wing for Ross County. We go out and spend, I think it was about £250,000 on him, which at the time we weren't spending a lot of money on anybody. So for us to go out and do that was still a decent outlay. And it brings us back to something we said right at the top when we were talking about Charlie Wyke. I think the reason people weren't bothered about Wyke leaving was because we'd seen Ross Stewart and people had seen we had a better player. I remember thinking that at the time, despite there being no real evidence to back it up in terms of, goals and things like that. I'd watched enough of Stewart to think actually next season he's more than capable of actually improving our forward line. And for reasons that Andrew spelled out there, he was really persistent player, somebody who could make something out of nothing. He was great at leading the press from the front, and I'm interested kind of over the next couple of years to see how his game changes now that he's had lots of bad injuries, because his game was a lot about being a workhorse and running about the pitch. And when you've had, when you've snapped your Achilles tendon, it's a bit difficult to play that way. So I'm going to be interested watching from afar how he does. But one of my favourite strikers I've ever had at Sunderland, because he was, his record was outstanding. And you always felt confident with him on the pitch, didn't you, that we would get a goal. We could play, as Andrew said, you could play a crap long ball forward and you would make something out of it. Think about that, the Chef Wed game in the playoffs where he scored at the Stadium of Light. And it was from nout, really, you know what I mean? But he that was the type of player he was. He could make something out of nothing. The reason I had him a little bit lower than some of the others, I had him below, Asamoah Gyan and Jibril Cisse in my bottom 5, was because they scored goals for us in the Premier League. Ross Stewart didn't. We're talking about League One. This was something that was mentioned earlier by a few of you, It has to come into your thinking, I think, that he didn't do it necessarily at the highest level, but even in the Championship, he adapted brilliantly, didn't he? He took to it like a fish to water and was brilliant for us up until the point that he left. So it's just one of them, I guess. I had him a little bit lower, but you'll not hear me say anything bad about Ross Stewart. There was nothing about him that I didn't enjoy watching in the Sunderland shirt. He was brilliant, and we did very well out of the deal. I've just mentioned how much we paid for him. You look at how much we made on him. That was the first real success of the model, wasn't it? That we bought a player for next to nout who wasn't playing necessarily as a centre forward in a fancied team or league, brought him over to Sunderland, made him a big player, moved him on for a lot of money, and then in hindsight, you sit back, you see that he's never really recovered from his injuries. It's very unlikely he's going to go on to do much in his career because of that, and that's a shame, really. But it's when we talk about some of these lads that we lost money on, Ross Stewart will always be a player that we look back fondly at, and the deal worked out for everybody.
I mean, Martin actually, he signed for us when he was 24, and his total record 40 goals and 81 appearances, but also, as Gav touched on, when he moved up to the Championship, 10 goals in 13 games. So, I mean, what was Ross Stewart's ceiling, if you like?
I think it's really difficult to say now, isn't it? I think if you look at that season that we had in the Championship, and he got injured in the warm-up before we played Borough, didn't he? And he's out with a thigh injury. And he just came back, played a little bit, and then obviously got his Achilles away at Fulham in the FA Cup. If we'd been able to keep him fit for that season, the sky was the limit for him, because as a striker, he has absolutely everything you could want. He had a bit of pace. He was good in the air. He could hold it up. He was intelligent. He could bring people in. He could, as you say, he could press, but he could score goals. And he had the knack of scoring goals. And when you watch strikers play, that knack for scoring goals and being in the right position, being able to finish, that kind of transcends leagues to me, because you can tell if a striker's got a natural finisher or not. And some people score goals still, and they'll not necessarily be a natural finisher, but they'll still be a good goal scorer. Ross Stewart was a natural finisher as well. He was in the right position. He just sniffed out chances. And, I actually think we would have been in the Premier League earlier if he'd stayed fit that season. I think that's how good he was. And I just think it's one of those what ifs. We were talking earlier about David Connolly almost signing earlier in his career. And I always kind of wonder if we'd got him 5 years earlier, what his goal scoring record would have looked like for us. I think it would have been really good. Ross Stewart, similar. If we'd been able to keep him fit and kept him for a couple of seasons, his goal scoring record could be comparable to or better than some of the people who we're going to go on and talk about, because he had everything. And it is such a shame that the injuries seem to have wrecked his career. I hope that he's fully over them now and he has a great season for Southampton and he comes back into the Premier League, because he is a Premier League quality player.
Yeah, I'll add David Kelly to that list as well, if he'd signed 5 or 6 years earlier as well, what his goal scoring record for Sunderland would have been like. But let's get into the top 5. So I'm going to do it in a very specific order. Gav, can we have your countdown from 5 up to your top pick, please?
Yeah. So, number 5, Kenwyne Jones. Number 4, Darren Bent. Number 3, Jermaine Defoe. Number 2, Kevin Phillips. And number 1 is Niall Quinn. So, he and Andrew have agreed on something there.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we'll get into those because you've all kind of flipped that top 4. But just quickly, because we only touched on Kenwyne Jones, and he's made your top 5. He didn't make Andrew's, but he's got, looking at his scoring record, it's a strange one. His scoring record, and I'll just kind of pull them up. It's very similar to Stephen Fletcher's. So Stephen Fletcher scored 23 in 108. Kenwyne Jones scored 28 in 101. Very similar. Yet you've got Kenwyne Jones in your top 5 and Fletcher towards the bottom. I mean, are you saying that, was Kenwyne Jones just that much better? Was he, because we talked about he could have been a top Premier League player if he played to the best of his ability week in, week out. He could have been a 20, 25 goal a season striker.
I loved him. He was just brilliant to watch at times, like Kenwyne Jones. I absolutely love watching him play. And you mentioned John Terry earlier and what he had to say about him, but he was that good. Like at the time you had Didier Drogba at Chelsea, who was a similar player in style to Jones. When Jones was really on it, there was nobody in the Premier League could handle him. Like he was an absolute handful. Big, strong, good footwork, brilliant in the air. He could dribble the ball. I mean, when he first came to Sunderland, I knew naught about him, if I'm honest. Really didn't know a lot about him. And he'd come in from Southampton, where he'd had a fairly decent season in the Championship the year we won the league. And we went out and brought him in for big money at the time. And I can just remember what he did was his immediate impression was good. Like he came into the team, didn't he? I think, did he scored that goal against Blackburn early in the season, I remember, where he...
Was it Reading he scored against on his debut?
Yeah, he scored on his debut, which was a brilliant...
Oh, his home debut, sorry.
Yes, he thumped that one at the bottom corner, didn't he, from a bit of distance. And I remember the one against Blackburn where he kind of, I don't know if my memories made this sound better than it actually was, but he flipped it over the defender's head and then took a touch and just stroked it into the net. But he was capable of... I think when you talk about Jones and you're just looking at his record in terms of goals scored, that doesn't give you the full picture, because he was a real presence up there and he just battered defenders. And I'm not going to skirt around it. There were a lot of times where he would just go missing and he wouldn't do that. And that was the frustration with Kenwyne Jones with a lot of fans, was he should have been better than he was. We should have seen more from him. But you caveat that by saying, well, he was, there's a reason he probably ended up at Sunderland and he wasn't playing for a top club. It was because he didn't have that level of consistency. But when he was on it, he was absolutely unbelievable player. I was gutted when he left, absolutely gutted. I think he wasn't fancied by Steve Bruce, was he? I don't think they saw eye to eye. I don't think Steve Bruce liked any of the Trinidad lads. He didn't get on with Carlos Edwards either. and they've all spoken about this since they've left the club. They've all spoken about how their relationship with Steve Bruce, it wasn't great. And then he went on to Stoke, and I think he did really well for them. And Tony,
actually, Gav,
didn't he?
Just in his time with us, I never thought he was the same player after he got injured on international duty.
Yeah, with David James, wasn't it? Who poleaxed him. I remember watching that game and being worried because it wasn't great, was it? It was a bad injury that he got, and I just think it was one of them where we're talking about, like, had he stuck around a bit more, had he, he had 3 seasons with us, mind, three good seasons, got 101 appearances over 3 Premier League seasons. He played a lot of football for us. But yeah, I think you're right. He wasn't the same player after that injury. But he should have done more. The frustration with Cameron Jones is that, when the best centre half in the country is talking about how good he is. I think what was the words John Terry used with it? He's the best header of the ball I've came up against, or the best aerial threat I've come up against, something like that. When you consider that,
he had absolutely everything, didn't he?
I can remember him being linked with Liverpool as well. Yeah. And Liverpool, I could have easily seen him play in that team. He was the type of player where if you picked him up and dropped him into any side in the Premier League, you could go, I can see how he would work in that team. Because like Didier Drogba, them type of strikers don't come along very often. There's not been many. You talk about Drogba, like, has there been anybody since really who's done it at the top level who could, like, literally do everything, like a proper battering ram with pace, and defenders didn't know what to do with him. Maybe Diego Costa for a period at Chelsea. Not been many, what I can think of. And Jones was in that mould. He should have done a lot more in the game. He should have went on to play, hundreds of games in the Premier League and won something with somebody, but he, didn't. And that's maybe why he ended up at Sunderland and why he never really amounted to much afterwards. But I loved him. Like I say, that's why I have him at 5th.
I think it's interesting with Jones when you look back on it, isn't it? Because he had a really, really good first season. And again, coming into a side that had just been newly promoted, big money, 23-year-old, so he was still in a very young stage of his career. And he's probably thinking, get a move into the Premier League, ideally have a couple of seasons at Sunderland, and you go up again to a higher level. And on his day, I think this is different when you're looking at the strikers and how we've ranked them. On his day, Jones was world-class. You couldn't really say that about Stephen Fletcher, I don't think. On his day, Stephen Fletcher was a really good Premier League goal scorer, but I don't think he was world-class. I think Cameron Jones could be world-class. And in terms of timeline, he came into Sunderland. Obviously, Keane signed him. I think he went on strike at Southampton, didn't he, to force the move through to Sunderland. And even in that January, the 1st January, he was getting linked with Liverpool, Chelsea. Big money moves away from the club, and the club were very adamant about keeping him. It was that next summer. So it was after his first season, he got crocked in that summer, and he missed the start of that next season. I think his first appearance of the season was in the 2-1 win against Newcastle at the Stadium of Light. And that was Roy Keane. I think, was that Roy Keane's last win as Sunderland manager? I think it was. So, he's coming back into the team, working his way up to full fitness. And then the manager who's bought him is gone. So you've got this sort of sequence of events that happened with Cameron Jones. And I think that probably contributed to him not fulfilling what we kind of perceive as his potential. Because when you looked at him after that first season, you're going, we have got some player on our hands here. He's going to be a 25, 30 million quid striker because he was that good and his potential was that good. And he should have gone on to do better things. But I think there's probably circumstances and reasons why that didn't happen.
Yeah, there's a proper lesson in there that, the amount of times that Sunderland have had huge bids for players and then afterwards their prices just dropped off the cliff. But let's get into the top 4s because it's really interesting, these top 4s. And Martin, we need your top 5 starting from 5 up to your top pick, please.
Well, Kenman's in at number 5. That was my number 5. And then the top 4, in 4th place is Jermaine Defoe. In 3rd place is Kevin Phillips. No, I'm only joking. 3rd place, Darren Bent. 2nd place, Niall Quinn. And top of the charts is Kevin Phillips.
It's so interesting with this top 4. You all had the same players, but all 3 of you had them in different orders. It's so interesting. You've got, Darren Bent and Jermaine Defoe was 3rd and 4th on all of the lists. So Andrew and Martin had Darren Bent 3rd and Jermaine Defoe 4th. Gav, you flipped them. And then the top 2, which we'll come on to. But Gav, I mean, I'll come back to you on this. But Martin, you had Darren Bent over Jermaine Defoe. And they played in very different teams, and which is one of the, we're talking about how to compare them and how to rank them. So what had Bent above Defoe for you?
For me, it was Darren Bent's impact when he came in. Darren Bent was a player on the up when we signed him. A big money signing. He hadn't quite sort of hit the straps at Spurs, but he'd done well in the Premier League at Charlton beforehand. I think his career at Spurs was kind of derailed a little bit with Harry Redknapp saying his wife, Sandra, could have scored that chance, he said, didn't he, when Darren Bent had missed an open goal in a game at White Hart Lane.
Just quickly, Martin, sorry, mate, but just quickly, how much do you think that actually impacted his reputation and meant he actually ended up at Sunderland?
Massively. I think, again, if you ask anybody about Darren Bent at Tottenham, that's something that will probably come up in the conversation for people who remember that time. And I think it was an awfully bad thing for a manager of a player to do, to ridicule him publicly. And I think that really set the tone for the rest of Darren Bent's career at Tottenham, and probably influenced how Tottenham fans thought about Harry Redknapp as well, because, while, it's kind of easy, the manager's right, I think most Tottenham fans who kind of understand the wider context would have thought it's not on that, because that's what every other football fan thought when you kind of had a laugh about it at the start, but then when you think about it, you go, it's shit management, that. And I think that really did kind of set the tone for him at Tottenham. And really, he was never, ever, ever going to make it at Tottenham after that. I remember that game at the Stadium of Light when Tottenham came up to us to play. And Darren Bent, I think did he miss a penalty very early on?
Yeah,
and then he scored a couple, missed another penalty. That was a game that Anton Ferdinand had a goal disallowed, wasn't it? He did the Michael Jackson moonwalk before realising that the referee had disallowed it. But look, I thought Darren Bent coming into the club, and actually the mantle he took on, because he came in as a big money signing, and he came in and he looked like a big money signing. He assumed that role so well. And that first season, I think we've talked in other parts about what happened subsequently, and he obviously wanted to get away. Those links to Turkey. He wasn't quite right the second season. That first season, if you're looking at a season the Sunderland strikers had, a full season, bar the top two in all of our lists, I don't think anybody comes close to that season that Darren Bent had for Sunderland.
Yeah. I mean, Gav, you were the only one who had Jermaine Defoe above Darren Bent. And I mean, look, as I said at the beginning, they played in very different sides, and Martin's just touched on it. But I still, Jermaine Defoe's record of, 37 goals in 100 games, and obviously that includes his second spell, but scoring 18 goals in 29 appearances in 2015-16 in that team. I just find his stats incredible when you consider the side he was playing in.
Well, even more so, the year we got relegated, he got 15 goals in the Premier League. That team was absolutely useless. It was absolutely dreadful, and Defoe still managed to find the net regularly, and that got him back into the England squad, didn't it? All that form, he was playing for England again after having dropped away, and then got him a decent move to Bournemouth afterwards. And he was, how old would he have been there? Maybe 30, 32, 33, 34, I can't remember now. But he was a little bit older in his career, obviously, and he looked after himself and still managed to do the business for us. For me, I had Defoe higher for a bunch of reasons. One, that, I think he played in the worse team than Bent. Bent had Malbronk supplying him. He had Bolo Zenden around him. We had a fantastic midfield that season where, Jesus Christ, you see some of the crap that Defoe was playing with. And the year before that, we were obviously a very different team. But it was only really that second half of the season, wasn't it, when we had Allardyce in charge, and I think Advocat had been playing him on the left, and he weirdly out of position. As soon as he moved him central again from sort of October onwards,
Defoe, that game at the Emirates, he was left back, wasn't he? In the game at the Emirates,
left wing back, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah. So once he reassumed his natural position, he couldn't stop scoring goals. Really, I think he did. He get 3 in a cup game that season against, was it, I want to say someone like Notts County or something like that. We won 6-3. I can't remember who we played now. Beat someone's.
Was it Exeter?
Exeter. That's it, yeah. Exeter. So he slightly inflated his record that season, but 18 goals in 34 games for Sunderland. is as good as anybody's record, really. It was, especially at his age. Having, he'd been cast aside. He went to Toronto, which is a retirement home, innit, at the MLS. He'd left Tottenham, where he hadn't really played much that season, went on to play in the MLS, did okay, and then we struck the deal of the century where we swapped him for Josie Altidore, which will never be topped, in my opinion. That's one of the best deals we've ever struck. But yeah, I just love Defoe. And then you've got, maybe some of the off-the-pitch stuff too. You've got to factor in. I think, we talk about genuine connections with players. Other than Quinn Phillips on that list, I think fans had the best relationship with Jermaine Defoe. And it was a lot to do with his, with the Bradley Lowry thing. He's, it brought a lot of really positive attention to the football club at a time when we didn't get a lot of that. We were getting a lot of good attention because of his relationship with a young lad who obviously was going through a really awful time. And
well, Gav, not only emotions off the pitch, but his emotions on the pitch when he scored that volley when you went for a piss.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, when he scored that amazing goal against Newcastle, which I wasn't there to see in the flesh because he bladder couldn't handle waiting until half time. But he that'll go down possibly as the greatest goal against Newcastle, I would say. I mean, it's very much, it would be up there. You look at Marco's in the playoffs, you look at...
I'll add that to the top 10 list we've got.
Yeah, well, that can be a pod all on its own, yeah. But it's got to be up there, hasn't it? And then he, falls to his knees and just cries. The pure emotion of scoring against Newcastle. He totally got it with Sunderland, didn't he, Defoe? I think that was it. Not many top level players come to the club. Anyways, never mind come to the club and then totally buy into the whole thing. And even now, Jimmy Montgomery had the stand named after him, and he was there. He was one of the players on the pitch. You've got to kind of factor in his second spell. You can't ignore it. But he was finished by that point, and it was, even then though, it was great, wasn't it, when he signed, like the emotion of all that and the one last dance and all this. And I just wish he came about,
I just remember when it broke live on the socials, didn't it?
Yeah, we Philly chasing him out of the academy. Yeah, but still though, it doesn't taint his time at Sunderland for me. Defoe, you're on about two legends above him. He'd be right up there for me as a legend. Maybe not a legend, but right up there, very, very close to being a Sunderland legend. And not necessarily for the things he did on the pitch. It was always, as I mentioned before, the relationship with Bradley, the positive image that he gave the football club, and just getting it. I just really do love Jermaine Defoe. I think he was fantastic for us, and he deserves to be where he is on our lists. Certainly top 3-4 strikers of the era. That's definitely where he needs to be.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you remember Jermaine Defoe, because when he first signed for us, I know he'd gone to Toronto, but he wasn't actually very popular with Sunderland fans because he'd crocked Craig Gordon, and that really started all of Craig Gordon's injury troubles. And Gordon was never the same. He came back for us and all that sort of stuff, but he was never the same goalkeeper for us after that. So at the time, Defoe wasn't actually the most popular player on Wearside, and he came in. It wasn't a massive hurdle for him to get over because it had been quite a while since that incident took place. But yeah, as I say, I think you can make arguments for Benton, Defoe in 3 and 4, but I think the fact that we've all got the two of them in either 3rd or 4th place kind of tells you everything you need to know about the quality that those two possessed.
Yep. And Andrew, just to get your 2 pence, because you had, just let me check, you had the same as Martin. You had Darren Bent in 3rd, and you had Jermaine Defoe in 4th. That's easy for me to say. And yeah, I mean, we've talked about their goal scoring records, but I mean, Martin was touching on it when Darren Bent signed. I think Darren Bent had already had kind of 3 or 4 England caps before he signed for us. He was 25 years old. I mean, 16 million or something in that region from Spurs. This was a proper statement from the club. One of the biggest I think we've made actually since we've been at the stadium, I like to say we should be up there.
Yeah, that was a next level signing. And as is always the case, there's always a big summer transfer saga, isn't there? Ben was the saga. And I think what endeared him
it was bigger than the Paul Hardiman one that we talked about. On this
yeah. I think, give him his dues as well, Bent had said early on or indicated, I want to come to Sunderland. So yeah,
tweeted it, hadn't he?
Was that it? Yeah.
Do I want to go to Hull? No. Do I want to go somewhere else? No, I want to go to Sunderland.
Bothered with Daniel Levy, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's right. And so here we are. Here we go, and an established top flight striker who his career was ahead of him. He wasn't like on a downward trajectory or anything like that. And as Martin said there, he's actually taking to social media to say, I want to be part of Sunderland. That's always going to give you a bit of a head start. He then scored on his debut, and this was all like, this doesn't happen to Sunderland. We don't sign established players who come in and hit the ground running. He was phenomenal. And we've touched upon goals per game record. It was brilliant for Darren Bent. Yeah. We could talk about the way he left, and I don't think we'll ever know the full story of what happened behind the scenes. But he had been agitating for a move, and that does sour things for me. But in terms of pure performances, brilliant. Couldn't ask for much more.
Do you reckon he is the biggest signing we've made at the point of his career? Like Stefan Schwartz is another one you could chuck into that list.
Yeah, but he was on that other end of his career.
He was 30 or so, wasn't he? I'm struggling to think of another signing, like current international,
England international,
current England national, proven Premier League player, 24, 25-year-old.
That's not a bad question. That
I would probably just because of where he was at the time we signed him. I'd chuck Jan in there. He was the star of the 2010 World Cup, wasn't he? When he signed for us. But he didn't have the proven Premier League record, obviously, that but he'd be up there for us in terms of status as signing signing somebody who, everyone steps back and goes, bloody hell, they've signed him. Yeah, Jan or Bent would be around there for me.
Just a good conversation, that.
Yeah, and just talking about his goal scoring record, Andrew, look, he played a quarter of the games of Kevin Phillips, but he's got the best goals per game ratio on the list. I mean, it's incredible when you look at, we'll look into Kevin Phillips, but we'll get into the top two. Actually, Andrew, I'll start with you because, look, I was a bit shocked because I thought the top two was going to be a given in a very particular order, and I didn't quite expect this because you and Gav went for Quinn over Phillips, and Gav's got some reasons which I think he'll get into, but what were your reasons in having Niall Quinn above Kevin Phillips?
I think Niall Quinn is above everybody. In terms of just my favourite Sunderland player. Forget strikers, I just think he was brilliant. It wasn't... I loved him as a footballer, very clever footballer. He could do very simple things that from the terraces I couldn't even see. He'd be able to, like, just with one deft header or a little flick, he'd tear a defence in half and put somebody through. When as you're sat there, you didn't even know that ball was on. Some of the goals he scored were brilliant. He went in goal for us, man. He was this brilliant character. But on top of that, you look at there's a hospital. I mean, come on, how many Sunderland players have got a children's hospital in their name? He brilliant fella. He came back, and another one who's come along when the club's on its knees and helped turn us around. A lot of these strikers we've talked about, like Bent and Jan, they might not have even come to Sunderland if Quinn hadn't have brought consortium together and got us back out of the Championship. It's not an anti-Kevin Phillips thing that I've put him second. It's just a pro-Niall Quinn thing. I love him to bits. I think he's brilliant.
And his story, though, Andrew, that with the injury and everything like that, because actually for a small period of time, you could argue. I remember waiting for a Sports Echo one night, and I always remember this. It was funny because it was when he, I can't remember whether, I don't think it was when he came, it might have been when he came back from injury or tried to later on in the season. He was still crocked, and someone said he's 6'4", but when he jumps, he's 5'11". Or something like that. When people were hammering him when I was waiting for the Sports Echo later in that first Premier League season, the last one at Roker Park. But is that part of it? That part of that journey that he came back and did what he did?
Yes, very possibly. And that's a nice way to do things. It's better to start badly and come good than start on fire and then have all the injury problems. I think that was part of it. I just love him. Just a brilliant guy. What I like as well about him is you hear all these stories of the ridiculous drinking and all of this. By Stephen Fletcher's time, when you hear about players going out on the drink, and Stephen Fletcher, wasn't he always eating takeaway food and all of this? And, you know, there was accusations he maybe wasn't the most professional. With Niall Quinn, I love that side of things. I love the fact that so it's a bit hypocritical, but just brilliant.
In Quinny's day, they called it refueling. I think that's what they called it in Quinny's day. But I mean, Martin, I mean, you had him top spot as well. And look, Andrew's talking about, you know, children's wings and all this. I thought we were going to be talking about the goal against Port Vale and goals like that.
No, I had Phillips first and Quinn second.
I got it. Sorry, it was Gav. Sorry, I've got you confused. You only want to have it the other way.
I did. But it's an interesting point in this, right? So when I was ranking them, I was like, is there any justification for not having Quinn Phillips 1 and 2 in whichever order? The only justification you could think of is that they were a true pair, and you wouldn't be marking them one without the other as two in this whole thing. Whereas Darren Bent wasn't part of a partnership. You know, he played with Jones, he played with whoever else, but he's not defined by being a partnership. And neither Quinn nor Phillips were as good without the other one alongside them. And it's interesting if you look at them completely individually, because it's virtually impossible to do, because they were always, for the vast majority of the time, they were together. Quinny's first season with us, he obviously got injured early on and didn't get back to it. Phillips's last season with us, which was also Quinn's, which ended rather abruptly, but Phillips wasn't half the player he was in that end of that season without Quinn there. So it's actually a really interesting one as a two, because they do come together, don't they?
That was one of the reasons why I had Quinn above Phillips. I think Quinn made Phillips and made a lot of his goals. And was he as good elsewhere? Perhaps
in 5 minutes' time, I will argue the reverse, Andrew.
Well,
all right.
I'll come on. Because actually I got it wrong, because Gav had now Quinn number one, and I mean you'll obviously go on to explain it a bit, your reasoning, Gav, but you know, looking at Quinn's stats, I mean obviously he scored 69 in 220 appearances, but you know, you're thinking about his best season and that title winning season, 21 goals in 42 appearances in that season. But then you've got to think about, because he was a foil, he wasn't the main goal scorer, and he scored 21 goals in 42 games. And if you think about how many, you know, like how many of Phillips's goals, because he broke Cloughie's record that season, but how many they came from Quinn, so he's probably involved in God knows how many goals that season.
Oh, yeah, he was my hero as a kid. And I know we had them both at the same time. We were very, very pleased to have had them both at the same time. But Quinny was my hero. He was the name I always wanted on the back of my shirt. And I loved Kevin Phillips. You'll never hear us say otherwise. But just Niall Quinn was, even taking away what he did as a chairman, you know, coming back to save the club, his legacy, which, I mean, other than the likes of Bobby Kerr and Jimmy Monty, you're talking about Niall Quinn, aren't you? Like, that's how much he means to Sunderland. But even as a player, he was my hero. I just loved him. I loved everything about the way he played. Andrew mentioned some of the things he used to do. I've still not seen a centre forward use that chest the way Niall Quinn could. He could trap a ball out of thin air.
Just quickly on that, the best thing about that was his trademark, where at the very last minute, and he never got pulled for it, was that little nudge on the defender to get that yard.
Yeah. But the way he used to bring his ball, we talked about Drogba before. Again, there's a striker who did it, but not as well as Quinny did. And I still do. Even that, it's something completely missing from the modern game. You don't find centre forwards who do that anymore. He was an absolute warrior, wasn't he? I loved him. He some of the quality of his goal. I mean, again, Super Kev scored some mint goals, but that you mentioned that volley against Port Vale, still my favourite ever Sunderland goal. The way he runs away to celebrate before it's even hit the back of the net, it was just unbelievable, wasn't it? He could do everything, and look, he didn't have pace, but he didn't need it. We just got the ball up to him, and we knew we could hold it up, and he was a nightmare for defenders. We were talking on another pod the other day about Marcel Desailly having to be brought off at half-time for Chelsea in that game where we beat them 4-1 at the stadium. It was because of Niall Quinn.
Sol Campbell, he tortured him that season as well.
You're talking about world-class defenders who, week after week in the Premier League, were at the top of their game. And Niall Quinn, in his in his twilight years was still bossing them about the pitch. And you look back at his career. He played for Arsenal and Man City. Maybe not of the status now Man City as they were back then. Obviously, Man City weren't a global elite club back then, but still, still good clubs to have played for, and played hundreds and hundreds of games in these teams. And then he comes to Sunderland, and you see, his first season he got a bad injury, and that could have ended him really, and it didn't. It didn't define him as a Sunderland player. And just, I absolutely love Niall Quinn. He, as Andrew said, he's above everybody in my eyes. Like, in my life as a Sunderland fan, there'll never be anybody tops him, I don't think. Maybe Luke Lunine runs him very close, but he's got a lot to do. We need Luke Lunine to do something more than just saving dogs on the beach. Maybe if he can get himself a wing of Sunderland Hospital as well, by the time he leaves, he might be up there. But Quinny undoubtedly number one for me.
Well, let's move on to the man who disagrees, because Martin had Kevin Phillips at number one. I mean, look, bargain signing from Peter Reid. I think it was like 300,000, something in that region, from Watford. We talked it was possibly David Connolly that he went in for and ended up getting Kevin Phillips in that signing. But look, broke Cloughie's record at Wembley in his first season, and then he was actually injured in the title-winning season, but went on to score a stupid amount of goals. First season in the Premier League, won the European Golden Shoe. I think he's sixth in the all-time goal-scoring ranks for Sunderland. 130 goals in 235 appearances. Goals per game, you're talking 235 appearances, and you're talking like 0.55 goals per game, a goal every other game. I mean, and his best season, 30 goals in 38 games in 99-2000. I mean, and he's your number one, Martin.
Oh, look, brilliant. I think we need to just revisit what this podcast is. It's the best Sunderland strikers. It's not the best Sunderland folk heroes or hospital openers or whatever it is. It's the best Sunderland strikers. And Kevin Phillips, for me, is the best striker I have seen play for Sunderland by a country mile. As a player, he could do absolutely everything. He could come deep and link the play up. He could get on his bike and go over the top. He could link up with the right wing, with the left wing, with the centre forward.
He was decent in the air for his size.
He could jump. You talk about Quinny's headers. Phillips could jump and power headers in. He could score tap-ins. He could score 30-yarders. You look at his goal against Chelsea. It was a goal against Everton he scored where he cut inside and curled in top corner. He came on when he got injured. He got injured in a game at home to Chester in the League Cup. And he was out in a ridiculous game. He should never have played, but he'd already scored in that game. And he only played because he wanted to keep scoring and get his goals up. He was out for a few months. It was a QPR he came back against. He scored a brilliant goal against QPR. Absolutely on fire. 35 goals. And, he came from a second division club, or third tier club. It was second division at the time in Watford. And everyone's thinking, who is this? And, as I say, we've been linked with David Connolly all throughout that summer. And people thought Connolly was going to be our main strike going into the Stadium of Light. We ended up going to Watford. Yes, we got Kevin Phillips, not David Connolly. And people are going, I'm not too sure. Haven't really heard of him before. Although he had a decent goal-scoring record in First Division. But he came in, scored in his first home game. I think he was suspended for the season opener at Sheffield United. Made his debut for us in the Stadium of Light's first league game against Man City, scored. And after that, it was just goals, goals, goals. And the biggest travesty you see, he went in the Premier League, got 30 goals. The summer before that, he'd been called up by England by Kevin Keegan. And the biggest travesty is that he did not get far more England caps and a bigger shot at international level, because he was such a good player and he deserved that chance. And he would have scored goals at international level because he was just too good not to. You factor all of that in. First season in the Premier League, 30 goals. European Golden Shoe or boot or slip or whatever they call it.
Plimsoll.
Plimsoll. But he's getting linked left, right and centre with big money moves. And he did not stamp his feet, demand a transfer, want away. He wanted to be at Sunderland. And he stayed at Sunderland. And, probably career-wise to his detriment, because if he took a move to Arsenal or Spurs or whoever else was getting linked at that time, after his first season with us, he would have had 50, 60 international caps by the end of his career, because he would have got into those teams. And look, the only downsides with Phillips. I think his last season with us, he wasn't fantastically good. But I blame Kevin Keegan for that, because I blame Kevin Keegan for a lot of things, mind you. But I blame Kevin Keegan for that because I thought Phillips, when he didn't get his chance with England, he actually tried to modify his style of play and show he was a better footballer than perhaps he needed to show previously. So he ended up coming deep a lot. He ended up trying to link up the play and becoming that sort of link-up striker, which didn't necessarily suit him. And I still wish he'd come back to us when he went to West Brom. I still wish he'd come back and joined Quinn when he came back as chairman. But look, Sunderland Best Person Award, Niall Quinn, absolutely. And I loved Quinn as a player. I've got him second on my list now. I thought he was fantastic. But in terms of being a striker and the goals he could score and what he gave to the team as a striker, Kevin Phillips by a mile.
Just quickly, you said goals there, which was a brilliant video, by the way, back in the day. I don't know if you remember that. And actually, I had a mate who had, let's say, an X-rated movie, and he hid it in the goals cover. And he'll know who he is if he's listening to this. But Andrew, very quickly, look, everything Martin said about that, but you had Kevin Phillips second.
I did, and as I said earlier, it wasn't an anti-Kevin Phillips thing at all. Just I thought Niall Quinn as a player was, this is a big call to make, I thought Niall Quinn as a player was more all-rounded than Kevin Phillips. As I'm saying these words and as I'm hearing them come out of me mouth, I'm thinking, how's this going to go down? Kevin Phillips was amazing. Absolutely amazing. For Sunderland to have a household name who was winning the European, what did we decide on? European flip-flop or the European slider. That is an amazing achievement. There was just something about, I respected Kevin Phillips. He gave me lots of memories, but I respected him. Whereas Quinn, I loved him, and I still.
I tell you, Quinny was such a fantastically good football player, and I think if you look at the top four that we've all got, in different orders, but we all got the top four. And I think there's actually quite a seismic gap between the top four that we've had to choose from and the rest of those strikers. You can make any sort of argument for whether Marcus Stewart goes in front of Stephen Fletcher and all that sort of stuff, but those top four are a completely different level in terms of footballers and strikers. And how lucky have we been over the past however many years to witness all of those play for us and score goals for us and watch them play live, because the four of those players, all very different, but fantastically good football players.
Yeah, and Andrew's had to dash because there's a Lee Johnson fan club meeting that he's late for, so he's had to dash. But Gav, look, you went for Niall Quinn. Look, Martin's just reeled everything off that Kevin Phillips achieved, and is it this argument? And we're going to have it throughout all these top tens because there's this emotional pull, isn't there? As a fan, you always, and I've got it with players. I mean, I remember in the past I've had huge arguments about Andy Melville because I thought he was brilliant, but a lot of people have slightly different opinions. But it's this pull, isn't it, between like who you think is the best and who your favourite player is, and there's always a conflict.
Yeah, that's really what decided my order, because I can't, as players, I know they're very different players, Quinn and Phillips, so it's hard to just judge them. Who scored the most goals? Kevin Phillips. But as a player, I thought Quinn was a better all-round footballer than Phillips. You know what I mean? Like the whole package, being able to do more with the ball. But it doesn't mean he's a better player necessarily. Either way, I just think when I put them side by side as players, I saw them as equals. Like, it's very difficult to say one better than the other because they brought something completely different to the team. So it then does come down to emotion for me. And as I said, when I was a kid, Niall Quinn was my favourite out of the pair of them. And subsequently, all the things that came afterwards. And yeah, we aren't talking about who was the best hospital opener or whatever it was that Martin said. But it affects me emotion when I talk about them both, about what he means to Sunderland. And Kevin Phillips means a lot to Sunderland. But as I think back to Kevin Phillips' time as a Sunderland player, I can't ignore the fact that he had a bad last season. The whole club did, man. We had an awful season when we got relegated. but he wasn't great. 3 transfer requests he put in to try and get away from the football club, which doesn't really get talked about when we talk about Kevin Phillips. You know, he didn't really want to be here in that last season, and we ended up selling him for buttons. Really, when you consider how good he was, what was it, 2 million quid or something like that?
Even hard, wasn't it?
When I was looking into it, we didn't even get the full fee because there was certain payments that he had to get, and I think we had to forgo certain things to allow him to move. So we lost this player for pennies, and he didn't want to be here in the end. And maybe that's more because the club was just going in the wrong direction. But Quinny never gave up on Sunderland, did he? And that was part of the reason why he became more than just a club legend. I think he came back and saved us at our lowest point. And yeah, I know what Martin's probably thinking of, when he did leave eventually as chairman. I'm sure look, you could sit all day kind of going into the ins and outs and stuff. But I've always said this about Phillips. I cannot shake this thing out the back of my head that he did force his way out the club in the end. He didn't want to be here.
No, well, Quinny decided very quickly to jack it in, despite being under contract and all that sort of stuff. And he left in November, a few weeks after Wilkinson came in.
Well, yeah, because didn't he? He was on the coaching staff, and when Wilkinson came in, he just thought he wasn't having any of it, or Wilkinson didn't fancy him or want him around the club.
Well, I think he didn't want him as a coach, didn't he? But I think he'd said something about wanting them just to be on the bench and come on and help the team. And Quinny thought it had gone kind of too far, which I can't blame him because he'd been such an integral part of things, and to be shifted out and be wanting to be a bit part player and just on the periphery, you can understand why he'd go. But
Well, I was going to say, Martin, I just want you to come back because Gav and Andrew both said that they thought Niall Quinn was a better all-round player. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, if you look at our list, I think a few of you, well, a couple of you at least, have said about them being a partnership. Look throughout the list and you kind of try and think who the others actually played with and alongside. It's really difficult to think who they played with, that they didn't really have kind of a partnership. And it goes back to that days when, in that era in the Premier League, you always talked about, and will still in the future talk about, those great partnerships.
Well, yeah, I think the only one that you can kind of think of really is Bent and Jones for a season, isn't it? When they played up front. Look, I think Kevin Phillips could literally have played in the vast majority of outfield positions on the field. I think he could have played on the wing, he could have played centre midfield. His leap on him probably would have made him a good secondary centre back if you wanted to.
He started off as right back, didn't he?
He started off as right full back. And I don't think Quinny could have played anywhere else apart from central. He could have played central defence, and obviously, as we saw against Bradford, goalkeeper. But you wouldn't have wanted Quinny dribbling down the left wing. It would be like Ross Stewart playing in the Scottish leagues, wouldn't it?
Or at the back, I remember him giving a penalty, the penalty that Sorensen saved.
In Newcastle, wasn't it?
It was Quinny's tackle, wasn't it?
It was.
Awful.
So look, I think it's interesting how you kind of define better player. I think Niall Quinn had better natural skill and the better creativity and awareness to manipulate the ball and to kind of manipulate himself as well in certain positions. I think Kevin Phillips was a brilliant all-round football player. He wasn't going to dribble past 7 players and do tricks and leave them all on their arses, but he could do everything he needed to work the goal-scoring positions. And he was a more natural goal scorer, I think, than Quinn. But look, again, we're kind of splitting hairs between the two of them. On another day I'm picking this list, I might have felt differently and put Quinn top. It's, again, very lucky to be able to have good conversations about, the top, as I said, the top 4 that we've got, but particularly the top 2.
Talking about lucky, Gav, last word, that I feel very lucky and very privileged to have lived through seeing them play week in, week out for Sunderland, because you look forward to going to the Stadium of Light because of the football we played. And it came from, obviously, we had players out wide and everything like that. But ultimately, when the ball went forward, we always looked dangerous and you always thought something was going to happen and things came out of nowhere. And we've talked about that era, but just watching these two, I feel so lucky to have seen these two play for Sunderland.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this the other week, but even now, you look back and we didn't achieve anything with that team other than promotion and a couple of 7th place finishes. We're not talking about like a cup winning team or a team who got into the Champions League, or do you know what I mean? Relative to Sunderland, certainly in the modern era, we had success with them, but wasn't over a sustained period. We didn't actually win anything. Yet still, we played the playoff final the other week, and Sky had the pair of them on for a chat and things like that. Even now, everyone still talks about Quinn and Phillips. And think of all the teams in the country and all the different eras and all the different strikers that they've been. And still now, TalkSport will get Niall Quinn on and they'll be like, oh, that partnership with you and Super Kev. And they're still selling out like rooms in, the Roker Hotel or the Talk-Ins and at the Point and things like that with these guys coming up on stage, even now, all these years later, and they still will for as long as they want to. Truly iconic pairing. And I would suspect you'll never see that again. You'll never see the likes of that again. I think the game's totally changed. I know these things are generally happening. It's generally circular, isn't it? And, football might get back to a point where I know we campaign for it every week. The return of the 4-4-2 and the big man, little man partnership. But honestly, I think those days are gone. And to have said that, I was lucky enough as a young kid, my dad taking us week in, week out, home and away to watch Sunderland play with them two up front. So privileged. And you're right, we're splitting hairs, really. Again, you could ask me in a week's time and I might have Kevin Phillips top. But yeah. I mean, I do feel sorry for anybody who didn't get to live through that, because all they've got are highlights packages and it doesn't give you the full context, does it? You used to go to the games. Like we were genuinely feared with them two up front. Up and down the country, nobody wanted to play us with them two up front when they were on the game. I mean, it was... and that's something as all of us can probably admit. It's been difficult for most of the time we've had as fans. No matter how old you are, I think unless you can go back to that Bank of England club, the one winning titles at the end of the 1800s, which nobody can. Not many of us can sit back and say like, we got to watch a Sunderland team which were feared, and they were the ones who seemed to, the other players in that team don't necessarily get the credit they do, and it's for a good reason, because they were the ones putting the ball in the back of the net. Yeah,
halcyon days, as John Ficklin described to us. And the one of the things about Wembley I absolutely loved was Niall Quinn and Kevin Phillips after the game, both telling stories about how they had to reject Peter Reid's kind of desperate pleas for them to go drinking with them in London after all these years. And he said that I think their only kind of saving grace was like they could say he's not the gaffer anymore, so they don't have to go out for a drink with him like they used to. But tells you a lot about those days. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. We're splitting hairs because let's look at the average of the three lads' picks. This is our top 10. So we've got Stephen Fletcher at 10, Asamoah Gyan at 9, Marcus Stewart at 8, Jibril Cisse at 7, Ross Stewart at 6, Kenwyne Jones at 5, Jermaine Defoe at 4, Darren Bent 3rd, Kevin Phillips 2nd, and Niall Quinn in our top spot. And just to put my head on the block, I'll go my top 10 very quickly. So I had Stephen Fletcher in 10, Jibril Cisse in 9, Marcus Stewart at 8, Asamoah Gyan in 7, Ross Stewart in 6th, Kenwyne Jones in 5th, Darren Bent in 4th, Jermaine Defoe in 3rd. I had Quinn in 2nd, and I had Phillips in top spot. So that was my 10. But look, as I said, there's no right or wrong answer. We've said it, it's an emotional pull when you're a fan to think about favourites and then pull stats into it. So it's a tough one, and we've tried today. So let us know how much you disagree with us, because I'm sure you do 100%. Even disagree with our shortlist. So let us know on the 10, and then let us know on the order that we put them in, so you can disagree with everything we've said today. But thank you very much, Gav. Appreciate it as always, mate.
Cheers, Mara. Been good.
And Martin, looking forward to the next one this week, mate.
Yes, no, thank you, mate. That was good. I enjoy ranking things and pulling arguments to pieces if you can. So that's all good fun.
Oh, we've got a big long list of these as well, so we'll keep getting into these. But brilliant. And thanks again for everyone for listening. We'll have loads on the Roker Report website. Even though it's the summer and now it's going on, we're going to try and keep doing daily releases on How We're the Podcast and do stuff like this because it's good fun. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.